Penguin Random House Audio presents The Come Up, an oral history of the rise of hip-hop by Jonathan Abrams. Read for you by Dion Graham, with Diontae Black, Torian Brackett, Langston Darby, Kevin R. Free, James Fouhey, Dominic Hoffman, J.D. Jackson, January LaVoy, Terrence Kidd, Reynaldo Piniella, Leon Nixon, Malik Rashad, Terrence Riggins, Isaiah Seward, Tashi Thomas, Isaiah Young, Adam Lazarre-White, and Myron Willis. For Aaron, and a crafting your own life's beat. Author's note. Every hip-hop music fan has an origin story. When the music ignited those first sparks, grabbing us, shaking us, initiating a lifelong relationship. Growing up in the suburbs of Los Angeles during the late 1980s, I was too young to appreciate the rebellious explosion of NWA, a group that opened millions to the possibilities of the genre. The group's lyrics did not lend themselves to frequent radio play, and my parents didn't openly invite that hoppity hip into our home. I was plugged in enough to applaud Dr. Dre when the Chronic landed, but could not yet truly appreciate the full evolution of his sonic mastery. Doggy Style, Snoop Doggy Dogg's debut album, painted the scenes of an elaborate party that my adolescent mind could only partly imagine. Instead, for me, the artist who truly stoked those early embers was Tupac Amaru Shakur. As he did for so many people my age, Pac ignited in me a full devotion to hip-hop music. This was back in the days when the music found you. Long before Spotify and iTunes, I would toggle the radio dial between 92.3, The Beat, and Power 106, and record Shakur's songs onto a cassette tape so I could play them back on demand. I got my hands on Me Against the World, Shakur's third album, when a teenage employee at Circuit City took pity on my pleading 11-year-old self. My mom unearthed the cassette, took one look at the parental advisory sticker, and marched me back to return it. I discreetly purchased another one, vowing to find a better hiding place. Such was the power and pull of Pac on my young mind. Pac gifted me a song or lyric for every emotion and feeling. He had a way of making it seem as though he was speaking directly to me, crystallizing thoughts and ideas that were only starting to percolate and form. Brenda's Got a Baby illuminated the structural inequities in the world that I sensed people like me faced, but were not being taught in school. Dear Mama existed for when I reflected over my mom and witnessed her trudge through setbacks. I reserved Hit 'em Up for those rare and insular moments I wanted to give the world double birds. Tupac's killing in late 1996 shattered my world. I mourned the death of an artist and poet who transcended his still young musical genre. I had come to view hip-hop music as a foundational block in my own life and wondered if it would continue evolving, emerging, and influencing after the loss of one of its brightest stars. The deaths of Shakur and other talented artists gunned down in their prime, like the notorious B.I.G., were colossal losses. But hip-hop music, above almost anything else, is resilient. The genre's original bricklayers in the Bronx of the 1970s heeded their own flickers of imagination to ignite a musical genre out of decay and neglect. The genre persevered, overcoming every obstacle imaginable, from an older generation who rejected it, to radio stations that did not want to play it, to politicians speaking out against it. I never found another Pac, but in the genre, I found a constant ally. I turned to hip-hop music when I needed inspiration or motivation, to zone out or home in during times of celebration and mourning, for education and enlightenment. Hip-hop music has now existed for almost half a century, and its origins and evolution are finally beginning to be studied and excavated with the rigor they deserve. But the voices of those who created, innovated, and persevered to propel a musical genre that would one day become the most popular in the United States are still seldom heard from, and some of their stories are at risk of being forever lost. That realization, which I had in 2017, became the catalyst for this project. After publishing my oral history of the groundbreaking TV show, The Wire, I aimed my next oral history project at a far more ambitious subject: hip-hop's rise and the creative sparks behind its first transcendent moments. Lyricism, after all, is a form of oral tradition. This oral history weaves together the sweeping origin, spread, and impact of hip-hop music across generation after generation as it made its dominant march across the country. It starts with the inventiveness of neglected kids amid the Bronx ruins before stretching to New York's other boroughs like the veins on a subway map. It encompasses hip-hop's path from parks onto vinyl. Its travels to the West Coast through the rise of gangster rap and G-Funk, the Southern surge in cities like Atlanta, Memphis, and New Orleans, and many places and moments beyond and in between. The chapters focus on the artistry, creativeness, and courage of those who made significant impacts and seek to illuminate the roots of careers that influenced generations of others. I began this project in the summer of 2018, and over the next 4 years, I would conduct over 300 interviews. The stories captured on these pages were provided by DJs, artists, producers, label executives, and journalists who lent their time and memories to deliver first-hand accounts. There are people whom I had hoped to talk to for this book and couldn't get to. I hope that these pages still manage to capture their contributions to the music. I also know that there are bricklayers whose influence is not documented in this book. But any omissions here are not a judgment on their inroads. Those legacies are eternal. A book dedicated just to listing the names of those who have made positive impacts on hip-hop music could never contain enough space. People, like hip-hop music, move along on their own schedules, which sometimes don't align with my reporting timeline. One individual replied to a direct message for an interview more than 2 years after I first sent the request. Some people whose thoughts I hoped to include in these pages declined requests, preferring to allow a lifetime of work to speak for itself. But many others, including some who have rarely granted interviews, were willing to sit down with me. These conversations, like the late Edward Duke Booty Fletcher, describing the origins of the message, DMC passionately detailing his groundbreaking efforts, Kool Mo D elaborating on his Grammys boycott, and executives like Ann Carley and Monica Lynch detailing their pioneering moves, resulted in a manuscript that, in its initial form, was nearly 3 times longer than the one you are listening to. In the interest of streamlining and including as many essential viewpoints and anecdotes as possible, the reflections here have been occasionally edited for length and clarity. The minor hitches that arise in natural conversation have been removed. The spirit and intent of every conversation remains. Occasionally, anecdotes conflict, perspectives of the same event can differ, and memories change and morph over time. I regard all of them as personal and valid. One challenge of compiling an oral history of a complex subject, one with overlapping chronologies and settings, is how to organize the material. I've sought to tell the story roughly in chronological order, beginning in the Bronx in the early 1970s. As you will see, however, some chapters do backtrack to explore certain figures and events relevant to their theme. Another challenge is how to fairly document complex individuals. It's important to acknowledge that, over the course of decades in the public eye, a few figures have, either in the past or recently, been subject to allegations of wrongdoing, some quite serious. I felt it was nonetheless important to the historical record to include recollections from several such people. Russell Simmons, for example, who made crucial creative and business contributions to the genre, while remaining mindful of and acknowledging their alleged inappropriate conduct. Each quote is accompanied by that person's professional identity, artist, DJ, producer, etc., affiliation with musical groups or significant record labels, and sometimes where they are from. Like the chapter introductions and narrative interstitials, this information is meant to provide readers with context. Occasionally, a person's title changes as the book progresses, in order to reflect the relevant information for that section. For example, Faith Newman was one of Def Jam's early employees before she later signed Nas to Columbia Records. Hip-hop music's rise to permeate every strand of popular culture is a winding, tangled, massive story. And it's one that continues to expand and evolve. Here's to those next sparks catching fire. 1. Lemonade from Lemons. Bronx, New York, 1973 to 1979.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?